I've really fallen out with giving scores to things. And that's saying something, because I used to put a hell of a lot of thought and effort into doing it. And maybe that's what killed it for me. As soon as it became something that required so much thought and yielded so little personal reward, I really had to question what was I getting out of it to begin with. Everyone I've ever spoken to about scores uses them in a completely unique way. I know some people who are kinda like me, and they go in search of other people's scores of things, and they generally like to know the public consensus on a thing by way of collecting those scores, just kind of as a shorthand for like, is this thing liked culturally? But in any case where something actually has a cultural impact, it's always for reasons that are more interesting than just being good, and plenty of stuff that's considered good is hard to care about for most people. Knowing the way that something gets scored in a broad sense really isn't that interesting or helpful, and it'll probably give you some pretty silly presuppositions about the nature of the thing being judged if you aren't already familiar with it, or otherwise will twist up your brain trying to understand why your judgment is so different from the nebulous collective judgment, which is actually comprised of tons of totally different takes that have been generalized down to their scores, which, as established, are used differently by every single person who uses them. So, what meaning is there? Understanding the way that one individual critic scores things can be a helpful shorthand to getting a sense of how good they think something is compared to other things. But it also doesn't get into the nuance of why they scored it that way, and it creates a lot of needless tension for both critics and audiences when they have to lower a score because of so-called flaws in a work, or struggle to lower a score because they have a lack of perceived flaws, even when none of these are interesting things to talk about when it comes to media. I used to get way too focused on the scores that other critics gave, and I can remember scores that Anthony Fantano or YMS gave to certain albums or movies more than a decade later. And I still can't help thinking about how they under or overrated this or that album or movie back then, even though there's a good chance they might not even remember or agree with those opinions anymore themselves. In Fantano's case, I especially tended to fixate on whatever he picked as the album's worst track, and what he did or didn't pick for the best tracks, which are always notated in the description, because I would get a whole complex about whether or not I agreed about certain songs being on these lists. Frankly, I'm haunted by these thoughts, never having gotten to argue against Fantano himself about these things, and doing so in my head forever. It's silly too, because the scores, the hard numbers, the lists, they just invite so much fixation because they are numbers and lists. Hard, comparative, objective, factual numbers and rankings. No matter what flowery justification I have for why I gave a 7.7 versus a 7.8, at the end of the day it came down to me looking at all the stuff I scored in that range and figuring out what my heart says is better or worse. For me, it represented the moment that I decided one thing was better to me than another, and so for the audience it becomes their prerogative to compare their own ranking against mine. It's one of the least interesting conversations we could be having internally about media, whether or not we even agree on exactly how good it is. And yet it's so tantalizingly easy. It seems like innocent fun, doesn't it? After all, if you're not a critic or you don't view your scores like an absolute ranking of media, there's really only 6 scores. 10, 9, 8, 7, 5, and 1. Whatever someone gives a 10, a 9, or an 8 is a 10 out of 10 show that either did or didn't hit that person strong enough for them to give it a 10. Like, if it just hit them exactly like that, they'll give it a 10. But the 8 show is just as good. It's just like not personal. A 7 is something that they liked in spite of recognizing some big flaws in it. Maybe some parts of it were annoying, but you liked the experience, so that's a 7. And then a 5 is something that you didn't like in spite of recognizing the quality of it. So you were like, oh, I'm pretty sure that this is good, but it just really bothered me. And then a 1 is just something that sucks too much to be judged as successful art. I don't think any of the other scores really mean anything to anyone unless they've seen enough stuff to like have so many 7s that they start saying some of the 7s are worse than the other 7s, so they're 6s. Like, it doesn't mean much. Every couple of years, I find myself at a point where my perspective has changed too much for me to think that I would feel exactly the same way about all of my scores if I revisited all of the same shows again. When I first returned to writing about anime in 2014 after I hadn't really been keeping up for the last 2 years, my taste in media had changed so much that I came back to anime from a totally different direction from where I had entered it before. And by 2022, I had exhausted every pathway through anime I could find and basically scored everything I had ever seen by the metrics that I developed in the 2010s. I started doing a lot of other things aside from watching anime, and now that I'm investigating anime again, I once more feel as though I'm coming in from another direction with a new perspective, and that I would feel differently about a lot of the scores I've given in the past based on the way that I judge things now. And I'm not even slightly interested in going back and actually trying to fix all of those fucking scores again, because the reality is that if I can't remember how I felt about a show, it doesn't really need a score besides zero. Zero impact. I can usually remember if a show had a negative impact, like a score under 5, or a positive, a score over 5, and if I scored a show an 8 or a more, I probably remember most of it. I don't think my scores of shows are interesting and worth remembering, especially if that's all you remember about my take and not the stuff I actually said that might have lent some perspective on the work. And one of my biggest influences as an internet critic is Yahtzee Croshaw, whose videos have never given scores, and yet I have never struggled to remember what his take was on a game. In fact, I can remember plenty of exact quotations that he had in describing something's quality. There's never been a video that ended with Yahtzee giving a game a 10 out of 10, but I will never forget the video that made me a fan when he said of Portal that it was
absolutely sublime from start to finish, and I will jam forks into my eyes if I ever use those words to describe anything else ever again. Yeah, I know it's not very funny to love a game, but fuck you. Portal's great, and if you don't think so, you must be stupid.
Okay, now's the part where you go to my link tree. This is the part where you consider voting for me for president in 2028 because I'll be over 35 and therefore I can run for president. This is where you go to buy my JPEG magazine, where I wrote a bunch of these cool little articles, and you can have all fucking 30 of them if you pay, what is it, $3? Yeah, sick. Hey, check it out. A couple of people must have bought the magazine because it says that I sold some of them. Let's see. $146. Wow. That's like a whole career. goldenwitchfire@gmail.com. That's my email address. Hey, what is the Golden Witch? I don't know, but she sure seems to be on trial. What the fuck is happening here? Wait a minute. Peep the style and the kids checking for it. The number one congestion is you motherfucking for it. I fucked up the lyrics to my own song. Cool lit, switch, and the bitch. Whole school brick. Alright, whatever. Yeah. We know about that. Okay. Yeah, but what about the Substack where all the written stuff is? Did you know that I post written stuff I don't even make videos out of sometimes? This is like a whole ass free written article. And then also I have a Twitch. I stream on Twitch and YouTube and Twitter. And currently Twitter doesn't have nearly as strict of copyright restriction, which is why this Don to Don video looks correct on here, unlike on the We Watch Anime channel where it's all fucked up with extra bullshit. You know, I haven't posted anything to my Picnic Adventure channel for a while, but if you ever just need to touch grass with me and my husband Bird, there's like ASMR of dog walking and cactus dodging. Okay. Oh, wait, this is where we're already at. You're already watching these videos. Did you already watch Naruto Killed the Ninja Star? Where I go through the whole history of the ninja boom of the 90s and how Naruto ended it and became the new ninja meta other than Ninja Turtles? Did you already watch my Perfect Blue analysis that's as long as the film itself and goes into perilous depths about the subject of dissociative identities and in particular perfectionism as a form of narcissism. Big psychological deconstruction. You could also be supporting my content. Your name would be on screen right now if you were giving me at least $10 a month on Patreon, like all the people whose names are on screen. Also my Substack backers, the ones who have given me names to put into the videos. I've got some backups here on Odyssey. My this channel automatically, or not this channel, the Ig Studio channel automatically posts here just to back up the content in case it gets pulled down. You can see what me and Bird are doing on the average weekend here on my Instagram. We were just at Bear Creek Lake State Park in Richmond. Actually, that was like south of Richmond. Some of this is at Belle Isle, which is in Richmond. Very cool place. Okay, I'm not going to go through every single thing I've ever made. Just, keep me in mind.